Hare Krishna! So we are starting Life Comes from Life by His Divine Grace, Śrīla A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda. This is Thoudam Diaries podcast and I'm your host, Lalita Devidasi. So let's dive in. For people who have come to accept every pronouncement of modern scientists as tested and proven truth, this book will be an eye-opener. Life Comes from Life is an impromptu but brilliant critique of some of the dominant policies, theories, and presuppositions of modern science and scientists by one of the greatest philosophers and scholars of the century, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda. Śrīla Prabhupāda's vivid analysis uncovers the hidden and blatantly unfounded assumptions that underlie currently fashionable doctrines concerning the origins and purpose of life. This book is based on taped morning walk conversations that Śrīla Prabhupāda had with some of his disciples during 1973 in the Los Angeles area. On those mornings when he focused on science, Śrīla Prabhupāda spoke mainly with his disciple, Thoudam D. Singh, Ph.D. An organic chemist, Dr. Singh presently directs the Bhaktivedanta Institute, an international center for advanced study and research in science, philosophy, and theology. Each day, wherever in the world he happened to be, Śrīla Prabhupāda would go out for a lengthy stroll in the chill quietude of the early morning, and cloaked in a warm wrap, he would share intimate moments with a small group of students, disciples, and special guests. Some mornings found him immersed in contemplation or quiet appreciation of the surroundings, and little dialogue emerged. At other times he spoke at great length and often with considerable intensity on various subjects. During these animated discourses he demonstrated that philosophical analysis need not be a dull, abstruse affair, but can be a dynamic cutting edge into every sphere of life. Nothing could escape his keen intellect, deep spiritual insight, and uncommon wit. Rejecting superficial and dogmatic thinking, he edified, challenged, cajoled, charmed, and enlightened his disciples, students, and he carefully guided them to increased insight and understanding. Śrīla Prabhupāda, 1896 to 1976, is an internationally recognized author, scholar, and spiritual preceptor, and he is widely esteemed as India's greatest cultural ambassador to the world. In Life Comes from Life, Śrīla Prabhupāda takes the role of philosopher, social critic. With philosophical rigor, profound common sense, and disarming frankness, he exposes not only modern science's methodological shortcomings and unexamined biases, but also the unverified and unverifiable speculations that scientists present to the trusting public as known fact. Thus, Śrīla Prabhupāda breaks the spell of the materialistic and nihilistic myths, which, masquerading as science, have so bewitched modern civilization. The publishers. Wow, that's a very nice foreword. Introduction: Science, Truth, and Fiction. Once upon a time, as in a fairy tale, most of us believed that the food we ate was basically wholesome, nutritious, and free from dangerous chemicals, that advertising may have been believable, and that product labels truly described the qualities and contents of what we fed our families and ourselves. Once upon a time, most of the world believed in the integrity of our heads of state, high-ranking political officials, and local leaders. Once upon a time, we thought our children were getting a solid education in the public school system. Once upon a time, many of us believed atomic energy had peacetime uses that were perfectly safe and completely congruous with a happy and healthy society. Yet, in recent times, our illusions have been shattered. Repeated exposes of widespread consumer fraud and grand political collusion and bribery have all but destroyed our former innocence. We now know that through mass marketing and the media, a veil of fantasy and deception can be created with such unprecedented expertise that it can become impossible for us to distinguish between substance and simulation, reality and illusion. Today, many scientists are propagating the doctrine that life originates from matter. However, they cannot provide proof either experimentally or theoretically. In fact, they hold their stance essentially on faith, in the face of all sorts of scientific objections. Śrīla Prabhupāda points out that this groundless dogma has done great damage to moral and spiritual standards worldwide, and has thus caused incalculable suffering. Though beset by internal doubt and division, modern scientists have somehow managed to present a united front to the unscientific, non-scientific public. Their behavior brings to mind the worst in political and corporate trickery. For instance, despite the recent outcry over their masking the difficulties of maintaining safety standards at nuclear power plants, the scientists and the government remain committed to nuclear power, and even make light of the fact that there is no safe way of dealing with radioactive waste. In popular works and in textbooks, scientists present their account of the material origin of life as the only possible scientific conclusion. They claim that no other theory can be scientifically acceptable. And so everyone is taught that life gradually arose from chemicals, a primordial soup consisting of amino acids, proteins, and other essential ingredients. Yet, in their journals and private discussions, the same scientists acknowledge that their theory has grave, sometimes insuperable, difficulties. For example, certain features of the DNA coding mechanism cast serious doubt upon the substance of evolutionary thought. The noted biologist W.H. Thorpe writes, "Thus we may be faced with the possibility that the origin of life, like the origin of the universe, becomes an impenetrable barrier to science and a block which resists all attempts to reduce biology to chemistry and physics." Unquote. The highly committed evolutionist Jacques Monod has pointed out these same difficulties. Theodosius Dobzhansky, another prominent advocate of evolution, can only agree, quote, "Our scientific knowledge is, of course, quite insufficient to give anything like satisfactory accounts of these transitions from no life to life, from no mind to mind. Biologists, as basically different in their views as W.H. Thorpe and Jacques Monod, agree that the origin of life is a difficult and thus far intractable and unsolved problem. I concur." Unquote. Dobzhansky goes on to call the origin of life, in quotes, "miraculous." These admissions by Dobzhansky, Monod, and Thorpe are by no means unique. Yet, in popular presentations and textbooks, one finds little hint of such widespread doubt. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner has shown that the probability of the existence of a self-duplicating unit is zero. Since the ability to reproduce is one of the fundamental characteristics of all living organisms, Wigner concludes that our present understanding of physics and chemistry does not enable us to explain the phenomenon of life. Herbert Yockey has demonstrated by information theory that even a single informational molecule such as cytochrome C, what to speak of complex organisms, could not have arisen by chance in the estimated lifetime of the Earth. Quote, "One must conclude, contrary to the established and current wisdom, a scenario describing the genesis of life on Earth by chance and natural causes, which can be accepted on the basis of fact and not faith, has not yet been written." Has not yet been written. Unquote. As we can see, on the one hand, many scientists have a deep personal commitment to the concept that life comes from matter. On the other hand, they admit that they do not have the evidence to corroborate their conviction and that their theory is beset with intractable problems. They are convinced that life arose from matter and is reducible to matter, yet at the same time they must confess to having scant scientific grounds for their conviction. Thus, their theory is a priori. It supersedes the scientific method and science itself. Their fervent, almost messianic hope is that someday, somehow, someone may be able to validate it, and in the meantime, their faith is unshakable. Dazzling technological advancements have given modern scientists an aura of infallibility, and so, when the scientists present untested or unprovable theories about life's origin, people tend to accept with blind faith. In passages about Earth, William Irvin Thompson writes, quote, "Just as once there was no appeal from the power of the churches without risking damnation, so now there is no appeal from the power of science without risking a charge of irrationality or insanity." Unquote. And as botanist Garrett Hardin notes, anyone who questions the status of Darwin, in quotes, inevitably attracts the speculative psychiatric eye to himself. The dialogues in Life Comes from Life may seem revolutionary, but then were not Newton, Pasteur, or Einstein scientific revolutionaries? Life comes from life does not simply criticize those who support the theory that matter is the origin of life. Rather, this book encourages them to rededicate themselves to a more genuine and intense quest for truth and knowledge, and to thereby redirect their valuable intelligence, resources, and work toward the true benefit of the world. Jai. I really liked the introduction and the foreword. And yes, before we dive in, and we shall dive in tomorrow to the first morning walk on April 18th, 1973, I would like to also say that science as it is not condemned by Śrīla Prabhupāda. But Śrīla Prabhupāda really questions when you don't really know something and you deny the Vedic explanation of it, which is infallible, blindly and unreasonably, just for the sake of denying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's where Śrīla Prabhupāda is strongly exposing or strongly opposing such basically unreasonable opposition. So, Jai, I have many friends who are scientists, and by scientists I mean who are either science students or have graduated and work as professors in different fields of science, including physics and everything. Of course, if you study the laws of material nature, like even Śrīla Prabhupāda in the previous book, he said that devotees, they don't do something like opposite to the physical laws of the universe. They're not foolish, right? That's a fact. Yet, if you talk about origins of life, and you're talking in a completely unscientific way, and you are just... Anyway, you already read it. The foreword was marvelous. And tomorrow we shall start with the first morning walk. And yes, so we shall see you tomorrow. The link to this book will appear tomorrow as well. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And I'm very excited. Hare Krishna. I remember last time I read this book, I opened Google and I started typing something like Interpol, or whom did I type, or NASA, and I wanted to send this book to some, high in charge people who are topmost scientists of the world right now. If they could only read this book and really, with an open mind and open, reason and common sense, go through this book. And as we will be reading this book, you will know what I'm talking about. Oh my God. The whole world would really, really change direction towards a very, very bright future. And a lot of problems that we're facing right now would have been finally solved. And we don't even need to invent a cycle. So, if you have any friends, please send the book and it will appear in the description tomorrow. So, Hare Krishna.